So finally, I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking specifically about boundaries. And this alone, I think, could be its own webinar. So boundaries, there's a great book by Nedra Glover, Tawab, and so there's a link on page 14 of your participant guide about this, but boundaries are expectations and needs that help you feel safe and comfortable in your relationships. Really, so boundaries tie to safety, they tie to trust. They also tie to connection and relationships and autonomy, right? Boundaries are this kind of cross-cutting. When we have good boundaries, we're actually able to help create all the other components of being a trauma-informed leader. And individuals who have experienced trauma have often had their physical and emotional boundaries fundamentally violated, often repeatedly. And one of the things that I've seen in leaders, and also when I was a practicing therapist, is sometimes when trauma happens, let's say a child has experienced trauma at school, and parents will say, they've gone through such a hard time. We're not making them go to school right now. We're not making them do this. We're not making them do their chores, right? And they really think they're being compassionate and caring. But boundaries are actually guardrails that help us feel safe. And one of the things we know when we're providing trauma treatment is that even if people don't like the boundaries, that boundaries are, they're these guardrails and that we all need them, and that actually creates safety. And so we feel this desire to loosen our boundaries when in fact it's more important that we keep a good schedule, that we don't loosen all of them, because that can actually be like, okay, then I don't know what to expect anymore. When somebody's experienced trauma, they need to know what to expect. Now, I've also seen the other where people are holding boundaries that maybe aren't that important, that it's way more about their own safety than creating team safety. So I think part of what we as leaders need to do is think about what are the areas where we have really good boundaries and that is beneficial to the team, and what are areas where we don't have good boundaries. And I think of boundaries both as a personal as a leader from a personal perspective, but also from a team perspective. So what are my boundaries? Where am I good and have challenges? And then what are my team's boundaries? And what's working there, and what are some opportunities? So finding that balance of appropriate, healthy, and relational boundaries is critical as a trauma-informed leader. So in the workplace, a lack of boundaries can lead to higher rates of burnout. So this constant desire to go above and beyond can lead to exhaustion over time. I have had staff members who are like the best, they're winning employee of excellence. They're going above and beyond, and inevitably they burn themselves out. So part of at the time I'm like, hey, we work for an organization where going above and beyond is great. We don't have near enough resources. I'm really glad this person stepped up. Then what happens is I lose that person because they burn out, and then we have to start over again. So setting those boundaries at the beginning is so important. And staff members can also feel this lack of fairness and equity regarding job duties. Like, why is this person getting away with this and I can't, for example? Especially if this one person's going above and beyond, and then they get frustrated that this other person's doing the bare minimum. And then the lack of clarity for staff members on work expectations and role clarity can create its own sense of stress and frustration. So what I invite you to do, and you can look at page 14 of your participant guide, is really, and this can be after this training, this is not something we're going to do here today, but really do a little bit of a personal self-assessment. What are ways in which you have good boundaries? Are you really good at not checking your email after hours? Are you really good at going on your annual vacation? Are you really good at waking up in the morning and having your morning be a sacred space for you? Whatever that might be. What are ways in which you struggle? Are you constantly stepping in to cover somebody else's duties instead of supporting them to do it? Are there, or do you check your email all weekend? What are the ways in which maybe your boundaries aren't great? And then thinking about it from a team level. What are ways in which your team has good boundaries? And so there's clarity of work, let's say, but what are ways in which they're not? Let's say they're all having side conversations. Those aren't good boundaries, right? And then to identify at least one personal and one team boundary that you can implement in the next week. And I really advocate for bringing this conversation to your team. Come to your team and say, hey, you know, I attended this training and we talked about boundaries and how important it is in a trauma-informed organization to have good boundaries. Let's talk about what our team's good boundaries are and what are some opportunities for us to have better boundaries, and have that be something that is transparent to the group. And that sharing it publicly can get some buy-in so that everybody can be on board with this. And I can promise you that we all have areas that we're proud of with our boundaries and all have areas where we really struggle. And as leaders, having good boundaries is really can help really mirror and support good boundaries for our team. Because often, you know, I used to have a leader who never took a day off. Even when they were on vacation, they checked their email. Do you know what I did? I felt like if I went on vacation, I had to check my email too, because that was the expectation. So the leaders really model this for our team members.